Hi, welcome to 10 Minute Talks. I'm Harshadeva.
Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Almira Zainutdinova, Vice President of vigIA, an organization focused on tech ethics and AI governance. With a multidisciplinary background spanning nearly 2 decades in linguistic, digital transformation, and international public service. She specializes in developing frameworks for responsible AI and human centered digital systems. Her career includes managing larger scale multilingual operations for global companies such as Microsoft and Airbus, as well as leading the linguistic division of a major engineering firm in Spain. An expert in tech ethics, she frequently advises on digital democracy, collaborations on global media initiatives, including projects with Al Jazeera, and writes about the social impacts of artificial intelligence. So thank you, Almira. Thank you very much for joining me today. Let's start with basis. Imagine I know nothing about this topic. How would you explain uh, responsible AI in a simplest possible way? What does it actually mean?
Okay, first of all, thank you for having me. For me, it's a real pleasure. I'm very, very happy to be here today with you on this podcast, and thank you for inviting me. And the first question about the responsible AI, this is a term that probably may sound a little bit dystopian, a little bit like utopian nowadays. But when we talk about the responsible AI, we mean a design. It's a special design, an approach to the design to develop and to deploy the AI systems, the automated systems that are aligned with the ethical approach, okay, with the protection of fundamental rights, with the collective well-being. So yes, I again want to emphasize that for many of us, it may sound an utopian term. But again, we people that are deeply engaged in AI ethics and AI governance, we always try to emphasize that it should not be only a bureaucratic procedure. It should be like a mere legal checklist to complete this bureaucratic process and that's it. No, it shall be like a sort of organizational culture and a way of acting that must be integrated from the very beginning and the development of all the systems. Ex ante, they say in Latin. This approach is called ex ante. That means before the event, before everything happens that we are observing now, you know. So I would split the concept of the responsible AI into different fundamental pillars. First of all, it's again governance and ethical culture. So it involves assuming that the institutions and the organizations who deploy, who develop the AI systems, they assume their responsibility, their accountability for their actions and for the outputs of the systems. I can mention such international organization as UNESCO or as the OECD that they developed these guidelines for responsible and trustworthy AI. They say that the organizations they need to set their clear policies, their clear protocols. They need to assign the roles and responsibilities of the people that are going to be in the loop of the systems. And of course, they need to promote the culture in itself in which this technology is guided. Again, I fully admit that in theory, everything sounds very nice and very human rights friendly, but what happens in practice? And this is another question, and this is another answer that I will try to bring you the exact, specific, let's say, samples of how the algorithm fails us as a humanity and how the algorithm fails us as vulnerable groups. Okay, so let's go on. The second pillar is the transparency and the explainability. You know that we cannot just say, okay, I don't know how this system works, this is a black box, this is inexplicable for me, and I don't really care. No, explainability is unavoidable. I work as a vice president of vigIA. This is a Spanish nonprofit association, and our slogan is the right to comprehend, the right to understand. That means that each citizen in this world, across the globe, has the right, the fundamental human right, to understand what is going on with these systems. That they sometimes they take the decisions to hire this or that candidate, or to give the loan to this person and not to that one. So all of us, we have this fundamental right to get the explanation why this happens. So the transparency and explainability is vital for accountability. It's absolutely fundamental. It's really essential for us to understand, and for the companies and the governments and the systems assume this accountability and this responsibility for the actions, for the decisions, for the algorithms outputs, and they need to ensure that the human is in the loop. Human is not missing, but human is in the loop, or human is on the loop in the whole process. And when I mention the human on the loop concept, I mean the human oversight. That is a third pillar of the responsible AI. The human should be in the process. The human must be in this process, and the human needs to control the whole process. Well, when we talk about the AI, we immediately think about the ChatGPT, about the Nano Banana, about some, I don't know, Suno, that is very well known for generating music and sounds. But in this context, I would like to put the emphasis on the predictive mechanisms, not on the general AI, but the predictive mechanisms and the predictive algorithms that are used in many countries to decide, let's say, to take the decision whether this social aid or whether this subsidized food is going to be granted to this or that group of people. So this is very important. That's why we cannot omit the role of the human in this whole process. And the critical decisions that the systems make, they shall be controlled and always validated by the trained professionals. And of course, if something happens, there should be the reversibility mechanism, like rollback tools that allow us to halt and correct these systems, and not just say, okay, I don't know what happens to the system. This is a black box. This is a decision of the automated system, and I don't know anything. I'm not accountable, etc., etc. Of course, there are many debates about the shared responsibility, because we don't know who is going to be finally responsible for this division. The programmer, the person who developed the code, the management of this firm, the subcontractor, who is going to be responsible? Because you know that finally nobody is going to really be available to share this responsibility. Nobody wants to assume this responsibility. So when we talk about the shared responsibility, who is going to be finally responsible? The first person who performed the code, or the management of the company? And I really doubt that the management of the company finally will assume the role of the full accountability, because we know that is going on. We have been witnessing all these technological advancements, and so I understand that we need to be really, well, I remain quite pessimistic in this context when we talk about the shared responsibility, sincerely. Okay, so and the privacy. The privacy by design, we're all living in the era of the massive data, of the manipulation of the data, we are living in the era of the data brokers, that they monetize, that they sell and buy our data. That we're like data now. We humans were data. Everything is bought, everything is sold, because everybody wants to monetize the data nowadays. So the responsible AI also need to protect the people's privacy. It's absolutely important, that it's essential that it should apply the principles of data minimization. They collecting only the strictly necessary information, and using some different privacy enhancing technologies like differential privacy. These are technical terms, okay? Federated learning it's called, or homomorphic encryption. So all these, they allow to train the complex AI models without really exposing users' identities or sensitive information. And as I previously mentioned, one of the major problems that really concerns me is the bias mitigation and the fairness. Because you know that I usually repeat it as a mantra that algorithms and AI is not neutral. So we don't have any neutral AI existing in this world. So algorithms, they are not neutral. And they are trained on the historically social prejudice. That is like it's a fact, and we need to admit and we need to recognize this fact. The historical training data contain a lot of prejudice towards the vulnerable groups, towards the vulnerable minorities, and it's true. It's absolutely, it's our reality we are facing nowadays. So that's why when I speak about the current AI, I imagine the, like in a mirror, that we are looking into this mirror and we don't really like the image, the reflection that we see in this mirror, because we see all these prejudices, we see all these injustice things that are happening nowadays. So basically, concluding all this, the complicated term of the concept of the responsible AI, it means that decisions, they cannot just work on their own. We need to be ethically and responsibly involved in the whole process, ensuring the maximum control, the maximum guarantee. And so we need to build the systems that it's not only about the performance, it's not only about the productivity, it's not only about the business, but it's about our lives. It's about if the people are safe, if the people are, the people can trust the public, if the people can trust their governments or not. So this is like in very, very brief terms what responsible AI is.
Thank you, Almira. Thank you for this very descriptive answer. So, well, looking at your work, how do you see AI influencing peace building, humanitarian action, and protection of vulnerable communities? And what ethical safeguards do you think we need most urgently?
Very, very fascinating question, because this resonates a lot with me. I myself, I am from the ethnic minority, and I myself, I know what it means to live as an ethnic minority, and what it means to preserve their identity, and what it means to try to struggle for your human rights. So yes, AI is heavily influencing our lives. Yes, AI is heavily influencing the human rights industry, the lives of the vulnerable groups, the lives of the ethnic minorities. I started raising awareness and started raising the concerns about all what I am seeing, all what I am observing, like a couple of years ago through social networks, through social media, by publishing articles and participating in conferences, because I want to share my personal observations, and I think that's really necessary. So, for example, let's recall a famous case that was investigated by Al Jazeera and Pulitzer in India, in Telangana state, where the algorithm basically denied the food grains to thousands of vulnerable people, thousands of vulnerable groups in this Telangana state. Between 2014 and 2019, Telangana cancelled over like 1 million food security cards and rejected a lot, like thousands applications, without issuing any notice and without issuing any explanation at all to these vulnerable citizens. So the government said, okay, so this was a fraud. This was a fraud, and we're not going to explain anything. And then the joint investigation revealed that it was not a fraud at all. It was a flaws, it was a failure in the data of this algorithm. So the algorithmic decisions by this system, of this system that was called Samagra Vedika, I don't know if I have pronounced it well, Samagra Vedika, was developed by a technological company over there. And the system basically they gathered the data of all these people from 30 government databases all over the country. And they said it was like a 360 degrees profiles and machine learning and wonderful breakthrough technological advancement, all these sort of things that we hear nowadays. And the officials, the state officers, of course, they had to consult the system's outputs. They needed to check. They had to check, but they didn't perform anything. So they just retained the formal authority, and in practice, they just remained silent. And there was a record published by the Amnesty International investigation, and it confirmed that the system raised serious humanitarian and serious human rights concerns in this sense, because there was no any human in the loop. There was only system in the loop, that's what happened. But it's not just an isolated case. This is the problem, because we're talking about something that happened in Spain. In Spain here, and we had a case, Bosco, where the algorithm also denied the social benefit due to some failures, due to some opaque systems code that nobody wanted to share with the people. So the same happened to Serbia, where several people with disabilities and people from Roma communities were also denied, because it was like fraud from the point of the view of this algorithm. Was something similar happened in Australia and in many places across the globe. Speaking about the predictive algorithm, it's clear that they are biased. I know the several cases, for example, from the US migration sources, where the immigrants that were seeking for the asylum, they were denied any entrance to the country because of the errors of the machine translation, of the AI enhanced translation that the migration authorities were using. They were not using the human resources for that, because of the cuts of the budget, or because of the unwillingness of the public authorities of using the human translators. I don't know. And because of this machine translation, many of them, they were denied the asylum, the entrance, and any aid of entering into the country, because of it was incorrectly, inconsistently translated, and nobody really gets. So what all these cases bring us? All these cases, they highlight that we cannot just blindly say that the technology is neutral and rely on it completely. No, it can be really harmful. It can be really harmful. It can really hurt the minorities and vulnerable groups. So yes, they can stigmatize the low-income neighborhoods. We also saw this happening in different European countries, in the European Union. They can violate fundamental rights of the citizens across the world. And because the citizens is the problem, because the citizens and even the developers, very often they don't understand the decisions these algorithms make. This is the point.
Thank you, Almira. Thank you very much. I would like to move from technology to something deeply human. In your work, you have also written and spoken about emotional violence. We often talk about direct violence, structural violence, or cultural violence. But emotional violence often remains invisible because it doesn't leave physical scars. Why do you think society still struggle to recognize emotional abuse as serious as physical violence? And what do you think need to change to break that silence?
So I'm very glad that you asked this question because this type of violence is something that I reflected in one of my recent articles for Mayor, where I usually collaborate as an independent contributor, independent writer. And I spoke about this type of violence in my article as somebody who witnessed this struggle. Not myself, not personally, but somebody who witnessed as a good friend of mine suffered the emotional abuse during many years of her life. And she, being an immigrant herself, encountered a lot of, obstacles to try to prove that this was a violence. It was not just the issue between the couple. No, it was an emotional violence. It was an emotional abuse. And so I understood how difficult it was to demonstrate and to fight against the system that basically doesn't recognize this type of violence or doesn't have any resources or the willingness to recognize it. And I understood that social expectations, the different experiences, like in the migrants groups, the support systems, they are really weak. The cultural attitudes, very often, the families, they don't understand that is what is going on, or they don't want support, or they are afraid of assuming this or that part of the story. So all this, it can make an emotional abuse seem like it's a private issue. It's a small private issue between the couple. But instead, I think that it's much larger. The problem is much larger, and the problem is a social one. Because very often the emotional abuse, it goes unnoticed. It's rarely discussed openly. It is something that we are not really feel very comfortable with. The institutions, they are very often, nearly almost, they don't take it seriously. And again, the families and the communities, they often misunderstand the topic of emotional violence. And many people, women and men, they also suffer from emotional abuse. It's wrong to think that only females suffer emotional abuse. So many people are taught just to endure, just to stand suffering, than recognizing that something is not really okay. So I had to read a lot of books about the emotional support, emotional abuse, about the gaslighting. We want to watch the movies about the gaslighting, like all these old Hollywood American black and white movies about the gaslighting. That's why I do believe that the emotional violence, it's not the personal experience anymore, it's a social problem nowadays. And we need to recognize, we need to learn how to recognize the symptoms. We need to learn that when the fear is becoming normal, it's not normal situation. It's not normal, okay. And the silence is not normal, okay. It's not normal at all. And self-doubt, the person starts doubting a lot, the complex of inferiority, all these manipulations. We need to learn how to recognize these small systems when the emotional abuse knocks on the door. We need to open the door and immediately recognize, but it's really difficult because, I think that recognizing the symptoms of emotional violence matters a lot. We need to talk about it because it matters a lot, and preventing it, that it's one of the major concerns and our major issues we're facing it nowadays. Preventing it is something that we need to share the responsibility, but I don't have the simple answer and the simple, the specific tool set. You need to prevent it by applying this and that, because I'm not a psychologist, but as somebody who witnessed it, and somebody who had to accompany their friend to different public institutions that were just trying to, to close their eyes in front of the situation that they were saying it's just your private issue. It's not okay. And I suffered together with her. That's why I decided to write that analysis where I reflected my thoughts and my feelings. And luckily, she's a happier person nowadays, travels a lot, enjoys her life. We see each other, we're enjoying some glass of Spanish wine here, enjoying the Spanish sun, and it's a happy end. That's why I think that speaking about the emotional violence is really important nowadays.
Thank you so much, Almira. Thank you for joining me today. And it was a pleasure to speaking with you. Thank you.
For me, it was a real pleasure. Thank you so much.